Okay, thank you, Chair Pine, and welcome to the new board members, Mueller and Rec. So this item concerns the major storms, which many people have been talking about, and you undoubtedly have had presentations on or discussions on in your city councils, boards, supervisors, and we'll discuss it today from One Shoreline's perspective, and also invite representatives of two cities to also make brief presentations. Azalea Mitch is here. She's the Public Works Director from the city of San Mateo. And on the line, on the Zoom line, is Lisa Peterson, who's the Public Works Director from the city of Pacific. Okay, so first of all, I'll go through a brief summary of some of the shoreline activities. And here's kind of my high level on the storms. That the pattern of extreme storms that followed extreme drought is extraordinary when viewed through the lens of the past, but it is, in terms of the future, considered ordinary. And that's the way I think we should all be thinking about it, is not that this was some amazing thing that's once in a lifetime, is that this is the new normal, and start making decisions based on that. And certainly we are trying to do that here on Shoreline. And that the flooding impacts near both the coastline and the bay shoreline, Pacific coastline and bay shoreline, are increasingly compounded by high tides and sea level rise, and we've seen that already. And then finally, most of the storm impacts cross jurisdictional lines, and that really speaks to kind of why we're all here today, having created One Shoreline a few years back. A couple images to show. This was an image from the mobile home park in the city, and it's called the RC Trailer Home Park. And it was shortly after the December 31 storm, and this is an image of one of the residents taking us on a tour. And what we see in the middle of the picture is one of their seriously antiquated and kind of overwhelmed pumps that's tasked with moving water out of this mobile home park and into the Bayfront Canal where we did a project. And we'll talk about the Bayfront Canal project and how it performed. But I wanted to highlight the fact that this area of these 5 mobile home parks is really not going to improve just because of our project. They need to be able to move water out of their area into the Bayfront Canal in order to completely eliminate the water buildup. They had a much better winter or better experience resulting from the storms than they would have without our project, but they still saw flooding. And until these pumps are addressed, they're going to continue, unfortunately, during these major events. The next picture is from a water treatment plant, Half Moon Bay. Thanks, Debbie Ruddock, for this photo that she took, I believe, on the 31st. And this is the electrical room, or it's part of an electrical building that provides energy for the water treatment plant. And there was approximately, based on what I saw, I was there about a week, 2 weeks afterwards, with Debbie and one of the managers of the plant, and it was probably about 8 inches of water in the building, and that was above the level of some of the electrical equipment, the base of it, and some of the conduits between the equipment, and so that's a very, very serious issue that needs to be addressed. And if Director Reddick wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, it was really a terrifying moment. Pillarcedals Creek was running, close to 3,000 CFS. And there was some vegetation that had come down the creek and created a block, and the inlet hadn't broken through yet. And so the water just, slopped over the side and down into the plant. The creek is right adjacent to the plant. And most of the time that's good, but with an atmospheric river, we're going to have to, take some steps to move the electrical. We'd been working on it. We had a study done, we had some cost estimates, but we hadn't, the managers of the various agencies hadn't agreed to anything yet. So, and then there's Kehoe Channel that comes down to the north of the plant. So we're in a vise situation. And so they were able to break the vegetation jam and the water stopped flowing in, but they had to, turn on the pumps. And we were very close to just losing power, which would have been, devastating. It was terrifying. I was the chair of the sewer authority at the time, so I was running out there with my waders and, so I'm telling you, it was not a good situation.
Sticking with the coast for a minute, this is Highway 1 at Surfers Beach, and you can see how close the erosion is now getting to the highway and the cars. This picture was taken after the storms concluded, and this kind of highlights in our minds, the connected nature between what's happening there at Highway 1 and Surfers Beach with the whole area of the Pillar Point Harbor. And this area is, despite the fact that Caltrans has been trying to armor the highway with all that rock placed there that you can see on the left of the picture, it's not working. And the erosion is getting very close to the highway, and obviously Caltrans knows a lot about that.
So was there additional erosion because of the storm?
Yes, additional erosion and actually a significant amount of additional sand deposition just south of this area that we saw pictures of. And that's all tied together is the problem of too much sand in some areas, too little sand in other areas. And the too little sand definitely contributes to the erosion problem. So, and this was made worse by these storms right here where we're looking. And then finally, a little bit of levity is in San Carlos at the Trader Joe's. This is a post from somebody that says, if you need anything from Trader Joe's, bring your kayak. There was a lot of water at this location, which is a Walgreens and Trader Joe's. I'm sure Mayor Rack is well aware of that. And there were people kayaking to get to the spot, but it was closed. It was closed actually for a couple of days because of the cleanup afterwards too. So those are some of the impacts. In terms of our activities, I'll divide it up into kind of 5 areas. The Belmont Creek dredging that was mentioned by one of the public comments. The Bayfront Canal project that we concluded about a year ago. San Bruno pump stations that we own and operate. Mapping flood impacts and our early warning system. And then, as I mentioned, City of San Mateo and Pacifico discuss this too. So first off, Belmont Creek. This image shows the area of Belmont Creek where those blue arrows are, and just out of Harbor Boulevard between Industrial Road and heading upstream towards Old County. And this is an area that has a lot of historic flooding. It impacts 3 jurisdictions, the cities of San Carlos and Belmont and unincorporated county area, which is north of Belmont Creek, or to maybe the upper left, and also closer to Highway 101. One of the areas that was impacted by flooding there is a mobile home park just north of Harbor Boulevard. And it was evacuated and was a major issue for the county on December 31 and in the days following. There was also flooding just north of Belmont Creek at Highway 101. And this is a picture taken on January 3rd when the business owners were cleaning out their properties, their businesses from all the water and mud that came in there. The creek is off to the right of that image. So this isn't a multi-jurisdictional area, as I mentioned, and after the New Year's Eve storm, that's the slide here. This is a picture taken on January 1st. This is Belmont Creek. Right, we're near that previous picture that you saw people cleaning out. This is a picture of Highway 101 and upstream, and it was the day after the storm. And you can kind of tell that there's just a whole bunch of mud that's right up against the highway, and it constrains the flow of Belmont Creek to just a kind of narrow channel off to the right. So because it's multi-jurisdictional and we wanted to get in there quickly before the next storm system came on January 4th, One Shoreline was asked by the county to dredge this area and clean it out so that it could flow and the businesses wouldn't get flooded again the next day. So on January 3rd, we mobilized a contractor to get out there and dig out the sediment that you see on the left side of the channel, if you will, flowing through 101, under 101. And they finished their work. This is a next day image. So what you see is basically we tried to clear out the area in front of Highway 101 so it could drain. And then also importantly, there was a storm drain that simply couldn't function because it was draining into this big pack of mud. And so cleaning out the storm drain so that those businesses could get some relief. We couldn't go further upstream because there's right there you can see it on the bottom left image. There is a very large sign for the highway, an electronic sign, and it was in the way of the equipment. And also we needed to get out there on that day because the storm was coming and moved to a portion, an area upstream that we'll talk about in 1 second. This is a picture of the same spot 10 days later. And what you'll see is there's debris that's built up just at the upstream base of the highway right here. And that's because underneath the highway, there's still a lot of mud and the debris can't flow through. And so the city of Belmont and the county have been in touch with Caltrans numerous times to see if they can clean out underneath the highway. And until they do that, there's going to be a big problem here still, no matter how much we do upstream. So that's something that we all want to kind of keep an eye on. And then I was saying upstream, we wanted to go on January 3rd. And this is work that was done in the evening of January 3rd by Industrial Road, an area that also flooded on New Year's Eve. So that was a key activity of ours to quickly get that contractor out there and dredge the channel. In terms of Bayfront Canal,
We have a question.
yeah, of course.
So back on that past slide, and when you have to dredge underneath these walkways, bridges, or freeway, does that have to be done by hand, or is there equipment that can get in there?
Well, there is equipment that can get in there as far as the equipment can get in. I'm not really sure how Caltrans will solve this problem. When in my previous position, I was at San Francisco JPA, and we dredged underneath a frontage road called West Bay Shore Road, and their equipment could get pretty far under there, probably in the range of 25 to 30 feet. So that's kind of what we would expect. You would want to do that when it's dry and not during a storm, and that would probably aid in the ability to get under there. But it's hard, it's challenging. And as you can see, I mean, as much as you can tell from the picture, it's pretty small opening.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it's smaller than the width of the channel upstream of there. And so it's going to be a big challenge. Any other questions?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So that portion over there, that's Belmont and County, and then obviously Caltrans on the road, but at that point in the creek.
At that point in the creek, it divides County and San Carlos.
In San Carlos.
That's right. That's right. County on the north side, San Carlos on the south side. A little further upstream, it divides Belmont and San Carlos.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's like, is that the Belmont like harbor and that's their industrial area?
Yeah. So
Okay.
what we were just looking at is where this red circle is that you see right there, just upstream of the highway. And at that point, on the upper left, it's County, and the bottom right, it's San Carlos.
No, I see. It's off of harbor. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Sure. Okay. I'll advance these. Bayfront Canal. The December 31 storm was more intense than the last biggest storm they had. They've had flooding since December of 2014, but that was a very large event for that area. And this storm was more intense, and it was coincident with a higher tide, but they saw less flooding. And so that is how we were pretty confident that the project that we completed there made a difference this time, is that the conditions were worse, but the flooding was less. But they did see flooding, as I mentioned, and that's largely an account of the pumps specific to the mobile home parks. Street and surface flooding, I would say, is a result of storm drain capacity in the area, which is challenging. So
Lynn, can you talk a little bit more about the pumps themselves? Is that the property owner who's responsible? Are we required to do anything to help improve the pump?
So it's complicated there, specific to the mobile home parks and the one trailer park. They are regulated by the state of California, as I understand it, the Housing and Community Development Department. And when I was out there and I showed that picture of the woman with the pump, we were there with Senator Becker and his staff and Redwood City staff, and talking about how do we make progress on this. It's a very difficult situation because the city doesn't have, from what the city reports, they don't have jurisdiction to work in the area. It's really a state issue. It's the regulatory agency over these trailer home facilities. And so it's really a dynamic between the resident, the manager / owner of the site, and the state of California. Redwood City does go in there, their public works, and they try to be helpful, but they feel like their hands are tied. So it's super complicated, and I think it's a work in progress. One Shoreline's role really is on the canal side of things, not so much within the private property, how the pumps are functioning, et cetera. But
And at the same time, we have people who are flooded year after year after year in the same location, and they don't have a voice. And we have to find a way to see who's going to speak for those individuals. Each time it floods, that they're afraid that something's going to happen at their property. So I don't know what we can do as a board to help. I know we're not going to push the state, but we can always remind them that these individuals who need the assistance.
yeah, and I think Redwood City's mayor is working on this too, with that exact issue in mind. So it's a very hard situation. Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that some of the people that live in those mobile home parks and trailer homes don't feel empowered to have their voice heard, and that's hard for them.
How many people? How many people live there?
Well, it's a good question. There's 5 mobile home parks. There's a lot.
So pretty fat, it's hundreds.
Hundreds of individual mobile homes or trailers now. So it's very, very sizable.
It's an odd, like all the boundaries, it's very odd. There's one of the trail parks that happens to be an unincorporated San Mateo, and the other 4 in Redwood City.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they all suffer from these inadequate pumps on their properties, right?
That's
Well,
right.
Same owner, so have same
No,
owner,
no,
multiple
no,
owners
no,
on top of
no.
it, so you have another complexity.
So what we're trying to do is lower the water surface elevation, or what we have done is lower the water surface elevation of the canal right behind there, so that their pumps can work more efficiently to get water into the canal. There's more that we can do regarding the canal, but at this point, with the storm that we saw December 31, that was a very large storm. The issue is not the canal right now. The issue is getting water into the canal. And that's where it gets trickier, let's say. So following the storm of December 31, and actually throughout the first couple of weeks of January, Colin here spent a lot of time with Redwood City staff at the site, working to clean debris. You can see on the picture at the bottom, a lot of debris was built up behind the new, what's called the trash rack. It basically, water comes in to the system, the trash rack turns around and takes the trash out of there so that water can efficiently flow into the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service ponds right next door. And that was an ongoing process of making sure that it worked correctly. It was really the first time it was tested since we put it in. And there were problems with it, but the problems were solvable, which is great. And it worked. So that's Bayfront Canal. Any other thoughts about that? So in terms of San Bruno, we have at One Shoreline a flood zone there that we inherited from San Mateo County, and we get property taxes from residents of San Bruno to pay, to operate, and maintain the pump stations there. San Bruno has a history of frequent flooding for a community in San Bruno called Bel Air, which is probably one of the least resourced areas of the city. And so we've been working with the city and the San Mateo County Public Works to monitor and maintain the pump stations. They drain water from the streets of Bel Air neighborhood and other parts of San Bruno, and they pump it into the creek. What you see in the picture at top is the creek, and on the left side of the picture is the Walnut Pump Station that we own and operate. And you see just in front of the Walnut Pump Station, a lot of water spilling out through the outfall from one of the pumps. The picture on the bottom also shows that Walnut Pump Station, but you see the water above the pump outfalls, and therefore the pump station can't work as efficiently, of course, because there's water there's water above the line in which it's trying to pump more water into. So we've also been exploring with the city of San Bruno measures that we can take in advance of the next big storm to try to reduce try to increase the capacity of the channel there so that those pumps can work more efficiently. And we're exploring that right now, and we're basically trying to set ourselves up for potentially doing in San Bruno Creek what we did in Belmont Creek, and waiting until we know that the next storms are coming to kind of go into that mode and do some excavation. So that's an ongoing discussion with the city right now. And then finally, McKenna really is coordinating with the city of San Bruno, and we're going to start a project in 2023 to kind of scope out a bigger long-term fix than kind of the regular maintenance of these pumps and maybe even some of the emergency work that I just described. But it would involve the tide gate at the bay. It would involve this area where it floods, and the pump stations that are over 50 years old. And so it's a big project that needs to be done. And fortunately, we have some money that's been built up from property taxes over the years to at least begin the planning and design process. And Chair Pine and I and McKenna were at the City of San Bruno City Council meeting a couple weeks back and made a presentation to the City Council about some of this work.
Just for the benefit of our new members, the One Shoreline collects property taxes in a couple of historic flood zones. We have actually considerable revenue from the Colma Creek flood zone, and we're relatively modest from the San Bruno Creek and the San Francisco Creek. But we do actually collect some property tax, which we can utilize in those areas only.
We have, I think, about $2.5 million in the San Bruno zone. Compared to Colma Creek, we have over 30 million. That's the most well-funded zone, the biggest, and that's 5 cities. Colma Creek, much bigger watershed. Okay, kind of pretty soon wrapping up. We also developed a map developed an online resource to map flood impacts, and we're just about ready to launch it. But it will. We've collected a lot of pictures, a lot of data about the storms, and we want to collect more of that, not just to kind of understand the current situation, but also as we plan future projects and where water is going right now. And so there will be more information coming shortly, I'd say in the next 10 days or so, probably, when this is ready to launch. And we'll invite people to upload their photos, and we could geotag it for specific locations in the county. And that could be publicly available information, but it will certainly help us with our project design work. Okay, so I'd like to turn it over to Azalea, and however you want to stand, sit, join the circle.
Thank you for having me, Azalea Mitchell, Works Director. Go to the next slide. For the city of San Mateo, a little bit about San Mateo, 105,000 residents, 12 square miles. We have a lot of land to cover. So if we think, I appreciated Len's presentation in terms of the like that you are all know about. So, wastewater plants, water plants, and also pump stations, because we have a flood control system that is managed. Right? The northern section of the city is all that, all those floodwaters are pumped out into the bay. San Mateo Creek is a large watershed that includes Crystal Springs Reservoir, and that flows directly to the bay. The rest of the city, 2/3 of the city, we do control. All that drainage goes into the Marina Lagoon, and we pump that water out. So a lot of control structure that we have. Next slide. So in terms of wet weather, we actually begin preparations in October. We have quite a few 100 miles of sewers, storm drains. When it rains, our sewer system does get the capacity is exceeded, and we often experience sanitary sewer overflows. So that's something that we have to monitor as well. Although we have $1 billion program, and we're investing in building new sewers and expanding the treatment plant that we also operate. In total, we have 37 pump stations that we maintain and operate, many catch basins. I know, and I have to say that I always have to speak about our workers, because for those 37 pump stations, we have a pump crew of 4 staff. So when folks call us and say we haven't seen you, it's because we've got 12 square miles and a lot of lines of sewers and storm drains that we have to clear up. So we're constantly clearing catch basins, trash racks, as Len explained. We actually have those devices that help move trash out of our creeks. We move leaves and debris. We do have a 24/7 sandbag station that anyone can go and have bags available, so people can make their own sandbags. And when we have a wet weather event, we ask our workers to get on the list for standby. So we rely on them to come in. Basically, if we have an issue 24/7, we call them up so they come and address the issues. So in terms of New Year's Eve, as Len said, we had something that will become more normal. So we were expecting 0.95 of an inch, and we get the reports from the National Weather Service. We actually look at the gauges in the city of San Mateo, and the predictions were for 0.95. We received 4 to 5 inches. Within 3 hours, that registered in sections of our watershed, the 100-year storm, and in 12 hours, it was the 200-year storm. So we were very overwhelmed, and it happened beginning at 3 in the morning. We received alarms at 5 in the morning, and by 8, that's what our residents experienced. A lot of flooding throughout the city. We responded as best as we could. These pictures were actually taken, 2 of them were taken by me. Our staff had been there since the early morning hours, removing trees that washed down, doing what they could on catch basins. And then we had our 42nd Avenue underpass flood because the pump station was overwhelmed and the motors were underwater. And so we had to respond very quickly to a life and safety issue. Deal with underpasses.
And you said the pumps, there was some kind of pumps there, but they weren't working, or?
So the water level got so high that it submerged the
Oh, I
pump
see.
station. So that was, New Year's Eve, and then we were expecting a much larger storm on the 4th. So we opened our EOC, our city manager and the city council named the local emergency. We developed traffic action plans so that we would be ready to close streets that were prone to flooding. Like, we were very concerned about 42nd Avenue flooding again. So we had all of the equipment set up so that we could close the road if it did flood much more quickly. We set up city calls and evacuation site. We have a very large lagoon that we lowered the levels there even further, and we increased staffing throughout, both at our treatment plant. We also asked our crews to split their shifts. So we typically work between 7 and 3:30, and we asked them to cover collections 24/7. So we split them between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. and had staff and there was all hands on deck. At the end, we had given out 500 tons of sand and 15,000 bags for sand. And we typically in a season go through 5,000. So that was full in just a matter of days. Next. So at the same time, we were contacted by the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission that the reservoir was very full. And they typically have the levels at a low enough to allow for the 100-year event. So they had not seen that spillway. I think it was 1997, 98 when it did spill, but they were very concerned about it overflowing given the fact that we were predicting multiple storms. So we had meetings with them throughout the week. We were assessing areas that might have to be evacuated along San Mateo Creek. And so that just added a little bit more stress. And just in a few, during those storms, the level in the reservoir increased by 10. So it came within 1.5 feet of spilling. And so we worked on our messaging. We have community members that really keep an eye on the reservoir. So they were pretty concerned. Luckily, not spill, and we've been coordinating with them on releases. These are just some pictures of our residents coming to our courtyards to fill their sandbags. Next. And then pictures of all the trees that came down really on the 4th and through the 7th. We were very fortunate that we did not have power outages during the New Year's Eve storm, although we did have power outages on the 4th and through the 7th. And then this is an example to the left of a trash track. This is Laurel Creek. And our staff have to go in to the creeks to remove, you can see a tire, you can see just I think they were removing bricks, and we have to make sure that these racks stay clear so the flow is not obstructed. I have one more. This is San Mateo Creek, a lot of vegetation that we removed. So that we also have trash racks on this creek, and we have to make sure that they stay clear so that we don't spill properties. So a lot of people power that goes into maintaining these systems. We also communicated to the community and website updated things that they can do, better prepare, get sand, and sign up.
Thank you. That's very good.
Thank you.
And then also online, Zoom, is Lisa Peterson from the City of Pacifica.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to start off with a little narrative of what happened in Pacifica, and then I'm going to try to share some photos of the flooding. For those of you who don't know, of course, Pacifica is on the coast, and we have about 40,000 residents. We have a wastewater treatment plant. We have a number of pump stations, both sewer and storm pumps. Prior to the storm event, we did do a number of our typical storm cleaning events that we do with our staff. We do generally expect larger storms in the winter, so we have a pretty good program to go out there and clear the channels, make sure that we're ready and prepared for any big storm events that come in. And of course, we always overstaff for these events as well. What we ended up having during the storm was about between December 26th to the end of the storm events, that was sort of in the middle of January, was about 20 inches of rain in Pacifica. And of course, the big one for us as well too, was the December 31st event. And in that event, we ended up having about 4 inches of rain in a 12-hour period, which was quite large and much bigger than the bomb cyclone that hit us last year in October, and had more damage as well because of it. And of course, the big event with the rain and of course the storm surge and large waves also impacted us. So we are estimating that we probably have around $800,000 in private home damage and probably about $1.6 million in city infrastructure damage. We gave away about 30,000 sandbags and 120 yards of sand during the storm events. We did run out of sand at some point, but I guess we are lucky because we have some beaches, so maybe we're not supposed to do that, but I think folks did do that while we were trying to replenish the sand. Our North Coast County Fire District for Pacifica received 107 calls for service during the storm event. Our police department received 195 calls, and Public Works Department logged 250 calls related to storm-related issues. We also had a number of trees down and also down power lines, about 7 trees that came down because of the storm. Also a number of trees we had to remove because they were a hazard and they were about to fall. We did also have one that did hit somebody in a vehicle, and down power lines came down with that as well. That person was injured. We had to have them wait in the car for a period of time because it wasn't safe due to the down power lines that were surrounding the car. In order to get to that person, we had to have PG&E come out and de-energize those lines. So that was, I'm sure, pretty traumatic for everybody, including the occupant of the car. We had a number of blocked roadways. We had, of course, clogged inlets, drainage channels, and that large storm event that I was telling you related to the flooding ended up putting more than 6 inches of sand along Beach Boulevard, the adjacent roadways and parking lots, and of course caused flooding. And I'll show some pictures of that in a minute. For the highway impacts, we had flooding along Skyline Boulevard, which is SR 35 at Sharp Park Road. That resulted in closure of that for a number of hours. We had a tree that came down on Highway 1 and SR 35 interchange that closed that roadway for several hours. Also Highway 1 north of Monterey. We had a mudslide that closed one lane for 24 hours. We did end up having 4 mudslides in the city. We have had our geotechnical firm go out there and assess that. We're moving forward with recommendations based on the geotechnical firm. We had a significant amount also of roadway damage, included some sections of roadway that got washed out, numerous potholes. Our wastewater treatment plant had the highest flow in a 48-hour period of ever in Pacifica history. So we had 31.4 million gallons in a 48-hour period. To put that into context, typically Pacifica during summer months, we will get about 3 to 4 million gallons of flow from the whole city. So as you can see, lots of rainwater infiltrating into the system there, and ultimately did require the city to bypass some of the water that didn't get complete treatment. It all did get our UV treatment, but it didn't all get complete treatment. So there was a significant amount that did not. We had 3 sanitary system overflows at about 10,000 gallons. And with that, I want to see if I can hopefully share my screen.
Can we just pause for one moment? I think, remember, Mueller has a question.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
So I have a question about the reports of sewage in the neighborhoods in Pacifica, and just really kind of want to understand what that mechanism was and what can be done to fix that.
Yes, sure. And so basically one of the neighborhoods, and this is a neighborhood, and I'm about to show a picture of it. And this, just to let you know, this is not all sewer. So they have a big issue with storm flooding in that neighborhood. This is our Anza Aguela neighborhood. Anza Aguela is the low spot of all of Pacifica. It's actually lower, than the beach area at the Linamar pump station. And this area is a special FEMA flood zone area. So it has had a history of flooding. And as a matter of fact, I've seen photos of people in canoes throughout the lower Linamar from storms, previous historic storms that they've had in that area. And related to this particular sanitary sewer overflow, and there's 2 issues that are going on there. So I want to stress that. One of them is the sanitary system overflow that happened this year, but did not happen last year. And the other issue is storm water flooding from the rain, which happened this year and also happened last year. Sometimes residents get the two confused. So I just wanted to make sure that we're clear about that. So related to the sanitary system overflow that happened at that location this year, that was basically due to the system being completely overloaded. As you may know, some of you may know that that city actually built at a requirement of the water board an equalization basin to hold this mixture of both sewer and water when we get these large storms. And that holds 2.1 million gallons. And what we hear lots of times from folks is they say, well, the system failed because, you had an SSO. Well, actually, the system didn't fail, the EQ basin, because the EQ basin held 2.1 million gallons of that mixture of rainwater and sewage. But, that is water that did not get out onto the street, right? Normally, all of that water would have been on the lower Lindemar Road. So it was being held in that containment basin, which I think was very helpful. The problem was that the entire system was overloaded and it didn't have enough capacity. And it was really a capacity issue. So one of the things that we had done previously is we went forward and last March, we requested that the council approve a 3.5% rate increase to allow us to do some of these very necessary improvements that we need to do to our wastewater treatment plant and collection system, which is old, and we need to do these improvements. So we did have a number of people that were complaining about that rate increase, including, interestingly enough, one of the people that floods in this particular area I'm going to show you. But what that did for us is now we have the funding in order to go in and do a very large I&I, which is infiltration and inflow project, to try to make the sewage system in that area watertight. And it was always, the plan of the city to do that. It just, is a very expensive project. And so the EQ basin, or this holding tank, was the first phase of that, to try to at least get some of that mixture of sewage and rainwater off the streets. And then the next phase is doing this I&I project, which is moving forward. And we're putting out a request for proposals on that right now. Now, I don't know if that answers your question. I can also talk about stormwater as well.
Yeah, that answers that. I appreciate you going over that. And the only other follow-up I would have is, do you have what you need to address that situation?
So we, and if I can, show you the stormwater picture of the location, because to me, one of the bigger issues that we have in that location is stormwater. So we are moving forward with the I&I project, and we do have funds. We just put a loan in place through iBank in order to start that project and get that in place. I think one of our bigger problems in that area is stormwater, and that is an area we need help. And if I can share my screen and just show you a photo of the area. So let's see here. So hopefully, hold on. Are you seeing that?
No picture.
I'm sorry, are you seeing it?
Yeah, now you see it.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this is the Anzaguel area, and what happened during this last storm is it flooded first with the storm water, because the storm system in the area, does not have the capacity to handle this. We have and have actually on the book since 2012, and recently updated our storm drain master plan. We have a project, a $6 million project that would help with this flooding. The city does not have the money, for that. So what we are, of course, doing is trying to find grant funding for that. So we do have an application in to HMGP, FEMA for funding. Hopefully, possibly can get something through that. And so this is really an area I would say that we have a great need for some funding for stormwater and stormwater infrastructure, which would help the situation. And if I can scroll down here, you can see another picture. And the stormwater flooding, because this is a low point, is significant in this area. And we do feel that this $6 million improvement would make a big difference and help. Luckily, none of the houses actually got water into them, but we did have an area which I want to show, which is down at our beach area. And here is our Beach Boulevard area. We did have homes that were flooded down in this area. This was a combination of both the storm surge highways. As you know, we do have a project we are trying to fund here, which is our Beach Boulevard Infrastructure Resiliency Project. We're trying to replace that existing seawall. We've been moving that project forward. That is an expensive project. We are wanting to get funding for that, and that to us is also a very critical project. We had, and I can show you. You can see this is all the sand that ended up being on the road in the parking lots, basically made the whole frontage area in this location impassable. We also, what ends up combining with this is we have an issue where we have Caltrans storm drain water that comes off of the freeway that comes through the San Francisco Golf Course property that ends up on city streets, Clarendon, which intersects this Beach Boulevard. And so we had a combination of flooding at that location because we need, and it's identified in our storm drain master plan, we need about a $2 million improvement there as well. So that flooding was combining with the problem with us not having a seawall of adequate height. And of course, a number of these homes in this area did have flooding and are going to have some damage. And then the last area I just wanted to show you was our Rockaway Beach area. And we had flooding in that area due to undersized storm drain. So here's another photo. So we did experience a number of locations that have flooding. It would be great to have some funding to help with both our seawall at the Beach Boulevard area, which we did see a number of homes actually did get, flooding in the lower floors there. And of course, the Anza-Aguela area as well, we have that $6 million improvement that we're trying to find grant funding for. And that was the end of my presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that.
Okay, well, that concludes the storm item. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Azalea. Any other questions or comments before we go to the next item?
I have one question. Can you just talk a little bit more about the 200-year flood? I know I keep hearing the 100, but the 200-year flood would be good to hear a little bit about that. What it means.
Well, so the definition of the 100-year flood or storm is 1% chance of it happening in any given year. So a 10-year event would have a 10% chance. Conversely, a 200-year event would have a 0.5 or 1/2% chance of happening in any given year. So what we're seeing is, just in general terms, we're seeing the so-called 100-year event of a 1% chance in any year becoming more common than just 1% chance in a year. And it's not a 100-year event, it's a 1% chance. So it could happen in 3 straight years or 2 straight years or 2 years out of 5 years or whatever, right? And so I think an important thing for us and for FEMA is to figure out, what does it really mean to be a 100-year event during climate, a changing climate? Should we look at it the same way? Because the 100-year event or the 1% chance event is determined based on history. And if everything is starting to change pretty rapidly, we've seen in the last couple of years, then it's hard to model something or create conditions for something that is solely based on history. We're rewriting history right now. So when we think about the objectives of our flood protection, it used to be protect against the 100-year, or what the flood control district had done for many decades was the 50-year storm, protect against the 50-year storm. And that wasn't unreasonable in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Protecting against a 50-year storm would pretty much protect you from what you needed to be protected from. So what we're trying to do, we're trying to build resiliency in the future, not the past.
Thank you.
It's a great question. And there are a lot of scientists and hydrologists and all that are trying to figure out how to make sense of it.
And just lastly, I'm sorry. So, and I know we put in the flood wall. Does the flood wall change at different levels, or is it consistent? So I'll go back to East Palo Alto, and our flood wall was put in for a 100-year event. So for a 200-year event, would that then be at a different level?
So in that particular case, because that's right at the bay, we picked, as you probably remember, we picked a very substantial sea level rise, number 2. And what that number is today's high tide plus 10 feet. When at that location, and really any location that's affected by tides, so it's all the way past Highway 101 in East Palo Alto. In most cities, it's past Highway 101. Most San Mateo County Bayside cities, it's past Highway 101, the daily high tide effect. Then in those situations, we want to have a solid, aggressive sea level rise number heading pretty far upstream. Now, at some point, it becomes very challenging, and we're finding this out in the Burlingame Millbrae project. It becomes very challenging when you have very constrained creeks with buildings right along those creeks right now to say, okay, how do we do that? Because we don't have the land rights, it's not on the table to buy out all these buildings and these businesses. So how do you deal with that? And so we're kind of working that through right now. And I think, sometime in the next couple of months, we'll talk with the board about what that's looking like, but it's a very challenging situation. So back to the East Palo Alto project, we picked this very big number. We had the benefit of a golf course on one side that we could widen the creek into. That helps a lot. So we had a constrained creek that was basically channelized for agriculture in the 1930s. And we took some golf course land and paid Palo Alto for that and widened it significantly. The combination of the widening and the raising of the levees to 10 feet above today's high tide really protects East Palo Alto from any storm you could imagine, 500-year, anything. And the reason for that is not because of the tides, not because of the water at that location, but because upstream the channel is still constrained. And so that amount of water would never reach East Palo Alto.
This is good as we're thinking about the other channels and then comparing.
Yeah. Where we have room to widen, we want to take advantage of that. And essentially, that's some of the things we're thinking about in the bay is we don't want to build walls or levees or something right up to the bay. That's why in our planning guidance, which we'll talk about later on tonight, one of the main tenets of it is to create setbacks from creeks and from the bay so that you have room for water. You're not just trying to constrain it, because that doesn't work.
Thank you.
You're fine?
Yeah, I think we have a public comment.
That's right, exactly. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, sorry, we have for a comment on 5A as well, which I think we,
Yes, I was about to mention that. Thank you, Brian.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Members of the public, if you wish to comment on item 5A regarding the board member appointments, or item 5B regarding the updates on the major storms, please do raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, I do have 2 hands raised. First is Ann Schneider, Mayor of Millbrae, followed by Debbie. And you'll have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you, and congratulations to the new board members. You didn't ask for Millbrae's update. I would give you one update. I haven't heard about our SSOs, given that we have a problem with that. But it turns out that our fresh water, our treated water, goes to Burlingame before it's released. And both of our cities were maxed out during the December 31st, January 1st storm. So that is something we'll be looking at. But generally, because SFO finally cleared out the canal, we did pretty well. I am bringing this up right now. Director Gauthier, we missed you at Emergency Services Council last week, but we have created a subcommittee to work on interagency communication during disaster times. You would be lovely to have on that subcommittee if you're interested. I can give you more background in it. For example, in Millbrae on December 31st, we asked SFO to open up their 2 pumps to go with our 2 pumps to drain Lamita Canal. And they basically said no. And then the next time we had that 2 days, the storm 2 or 3 days later, they apparently got enough feedback that when we asked them, they said, of course. So that interagency communication is pretty important for all of us who are subjected to, let me rephrase, working with other outside agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next speaker will be Debbie. At this time, I'll make the announcement for a last call for folks to raise their hand. Okay, after Debbie, we'll have Sue Vaterlos. So Debbie, go ahead. You'll have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Yes, this is in relationship to Belmont Creek, and I sent Mayor Rack several photographs and videos showing Belmont Creek at the intersection of Old County Road, which is west of Industrial. That was on the 25th, and it showed at least 10 feet of mud underneath that bridge there where Old County Road crosses over. And it dawned on me that the developer at that site for 642 Quarry, he backs up to the creek. It's a life science development, and that is on their property. So maybe a source of revenue is for the new life science developers that are building along the creek to engage in creek restoration or the kind of traps that you showed in your earlier slides. So maybe that is one source of revenue that you could look at, especially at that site. Another thing, creek setbacks. San Carlos City Council recently in their general plan committed to not giving exemptions to the 25-foot creek setbacks. And that's so important for all the life science developments that are going in along there, because some are built right up to the creek, some of the old industrial buildings. And so those will be replaced with life science buildings that will be set further back. So if that's something that your group would be interested in providing education about, that would be great. And then finally, also at the 642 Quarry site, the developer had asked for a bioscience lab there at a high level of BSL-3. And that was very concerning because they were also asking for underground parking. And underground parking that close to a creek that floods seemed very dangerous for the public. So perhaps your group could talk about no underground parking in FEMA flood zones or in areas close to the creek. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Our last public comment will be by Vice Mayor Sue Vaterlos from Pacifica. Sue, you'll have 2 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for including the coast. I know, Len, that I always bring it up, but I just think it's really important in the sea level rise to include the coast, because so much of what happens here is on the bay side. And you can see that we had tremendous activity during the storms, and we will continue to have it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. At this time, I don't have any other hands raised, Chair, so back to you.
Okay, unless there's any further board comment, we can move on to 5C, which is an update on the flood early warning system.